So Politico is reporting a leak from the Supreme Court, which is a big deal in itself, but indicating that Roe versus Wade is about to be overturned, if this story is to be believed, and there does seem to be a lot of credibility behind it at this point. Roe versus Wade was decided in 1973 and gave women the federally protected right to have an abortion in this country. It has been highly controversial for the past 50 years. Prior to 1973 and Roe versus Wade, abortion, the right to have an abortion, was decided by individual states. The states made the decision, and if you lived in a state that didn't allow it, maybe you had to go somewhere else. What it appears right now is, if this happens, it's going to go back to the way it used to be. At the time of Roe versus Wade, just to give you an indication of where the country was, 1973, 30 of our 50 states in this country prohibited abortion entirely. 30 out of 50 prohibited it, and the Supreme Court decided that it was federally protected to have an abortion in this country. This decision, if it stands, is in response to the Mississippi lawsuit prohibiting abortion after the 15th week of pregnancy. We've seen some red states making this move, prohibiting before 15 weeks or after 15 weeks before a fetus is viable outside of the mother's womb. That was a law that was designed to be a challenge to Roe versus Wade, which takes it to fetal viability, which is more like the end of the second trimester. It appears the mission of Mississippi's lawsuit has been accomplished. And joining me now to break a lot of this down, the perfect person to talk to about this, constitutional law professor emeritus Alan Dershowitz. Sir, thank you for coming on tonight. And I know we're going to get into the fact that there was a leak here, and I know that you think that is a very big deal, and I do agree with that. But first, break down exactly what this means as far as, obviously, if this happens.
Well, let me first amend one thing you said. You talked about Roe versus Wade making it a federally protected right. No, that would be done by statute, a federal statute. It's a constitutionally protected right, which means no legislature, not the federal or the state, can interfere with it.
Okay.
That seems gone. It seems likely because this reads like an Alito decision. I've been following the Supreme Court now for, 57 years? I was a law clerk on it about 57 years ago, and I know the workings of the court. I know most of the justices. I know a lot of the law clerks. This has the sign of authenticity. It also, to me, and this is just a theory, but I think it may be correct, the leak was a very deliberate leak, perhaps by a law clerk who was very strongly opposed to reversing Roe versus Wade, seeking to make it public now so that pressure could be put on the Supreme Court, either by an act of Congress to pack the court or an act of Congress making a federal legislative right of every woman to have an abortion based on the Commerce Clause. But this was not just an inadvertent leak. I think this was an act of civil disobedience engaged in by a determined law clerk who thought it was so serious that a woman's right to abortion would be taken away that they were willing to risk their bar, their career, their heritage on this, because this is going to be investigated. The FBI is going to be called in. There's going to be an attempt to break the journalist privilege. There's going to be an attempt to call Politico and demand of them that they reveal the source. Politico won't do it.
They won't do it.
But the case may go all the way to the Supreme Court on that issue as well. And so this is a monumental day. Chief Justice Roberts is just so upset, I can imagine, because he's lost control. People will think, at least, he's lost control of the court. And this leak, but in all the years I've been following the Supreme Court, there's never been a leak like this.
I mean, how do you control it, though? I mean, you look at a situation like this. I mean, we know how passionate both sides are about that right to an abortion. We know the left goes nuts over this issue. They see the pending end of Roe versus Wade. I mean, I can't even imagine what tomorrow is going to look like in this country. I think they're going to be out full protest. It's going to be insane outside the Supreme Court. You have somebody that probably fashions themselves as some kind of a hero, of a renegade that says, I'm going to leak this out and save it. And then I think they're going to write a book. I think they're going to be all over cable news channels. They're going to be some kind of a hero of the left for doing this.
But they won't be practicing law anymore. They will be disbarred if this comes to light, and if it We may never know who leaked it, but we may find out, and that person will lose her or his career, but will become a hero to the left. So it's a very important day in Supreme Court history. It will also result in a tightening up of the hiring of law clerks.
Sure.
Nothing like this has ever occurred. Now, there's a 2% chance, there's no truth to this, that somebody created a fake story, but I can't imagine that Politico would risk its reputation. And
you said yourself it reads like Samuel Alito. You know these guys. You know how they write. You say this reads like his writing.
Yeah, I think that's right. And look, I myself personally strongly oppose overruling Roe versus Wade. I think it will be a terrible thing for women and women's rights, and I think it will be upsetting to America. But I never let my personal views in any way interfere with my analysis. And
Sure.
my analysis is that this may have been a leak designed to engage in an act of civil disobedience. But I hope I'm wrong. I hope that the Supreme Court upholds Roe versus Wade, but I don't think they will. I think this is a sign that the Supreme Court will probably reverse it.
Do you think is it a 6-3? Is it a 5-4? I mean, what do the numbers look like?
I don't think Roberts will go along. I think he will say the issue is not before us. We can uphold the Mississippi statute. And if we uphold the Mississippi statute, all we do is say 15 weeks, and we don't have to reach out and reverse Roe versus Wade. That issue is not before us. There may be some hope that maybe Kavanaugh conceivably could be persuaded to engage in judicial restraint and say, yes, Mississippi will be upheld, but we're not going to go out of our way to overrule all of Roe versus Wade.
And just to
there's going to be a lot of talk about this tomorrow, obviously.
And just to let people know, and let's go ahead and pull this. This is from the leaked document, the alleged leaked document. For the first 185 years after the adoption of the Constitution, each state was permitted to address the issue of abortion in accordance with the views of its citizens. So it was up to the state. Then in 1973, this court decided Roe versus Wade.
That's nonsense. That's a nonsense argument. You can make the same argument that for the first 100 years of our existence, every state was able to decide whether schools should be segregated, whether travel or hotel should be segregated. And then suddenly in 1954, we interpreted the Equal Protection Clause to deny that. So, history doesn't determine always the outcome of cases. It's an argument that people make, but it's not a particularly.
Do you think Roe versus Wade has a good foundation? You think that it's because I mean you hear the argument. What do you say to people that say that it's a ridiculous law that it's not based on a good foundation?
It's not ridiculous.
Okay.
It's a stretch. There's nothing in the Constitution specifically that should be upheld. I think there's been a tremendous amount of reliance on it by states, by women, by hospitals, by clinics. And so I would be strongly opposed to reversing it.
Yeah.
But there has been criticism of the decision for years. But there's been even more criticism of Brown versus Board of Education. When Brown versus Board of Education came down in '54, I was 16 years old. I remember how it was attacked as not based on precedent, not based on the history of the 14th Amendment. And yet today it would be unthinkable to reverse Brown versus Board of Education.
Right.
So, the argument is not so much about how logical the decision is. The argument is really about the power of the Supreme Court to change 50 years of law simply based on new justices being appointed. And that's going to be upsetting to stare decisis, to the concept that you leave the law alone unless there are compelling reasons for changing it.
Let me ask you one final question before I cut you loose. The court, the impact of this on the Supreme Court. My Twitter right now is a nuclear war zone. People just going off on everything. But people are talking about how the damage that this will do to the Supreme Court. What does the Supreme Court need to do to correct whatever damage has already been done?
Well, I can tell you, I know John Roberts. I knew him as a law student. He's a terrific Chief Justice. He is sweating. He is up late. He is on the phone now. He is calling all the justices. Maybe he's calling the FBI. I'm not clear myself as to whether it violates a specific federal statute to have leaked this, but surely it requires an investigation. He's going to want to get to the bottom of this. He's going to want to be upfront about it. And what he cares about more than anything is preserving the integrity, reputation, and dignity of the Supreme Court of the United States, which suffered a terrible blow today.
What a story. Professor Dershowitz, thank you for jumping up with us so fast. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.